What is inspiration? We will discuss a modern example to try to understand it. Do we have evidence indicating God's communication to Bible writers? There actually are many reasons to think that we do have such evidence. We can also evaluate the question of inspiration in a person who some accept as a modern inspired prophet. There is new evidence for the nature of inspiration when we study the works of Ellen G. White. This includes new research comparing the health principles of Ellen White, other health reformers in the 1800s, and modern medicine. In the 1800s, it was becoming evident that there were a lot of problems in the field of medicine. And from the 1830s and onward, there were prominent health reformers, including Sylvester Graham, Horace Mann, Larkin Coles, James Jackson, William Alcott, Diocletian Lewis, Russell Trowell, and John Harvey Kellogg. Ellen White began to talk about health reform in the 1860s. Her main health vision came in June 1863, and she first published these health principles in 1864 in Spiritual Gifts. Then, some years later, she wrote a bigger book, Ministry of Healing, in 1905. An Australian physician, Don McMahon, completed some research and published it in 2004. He compared Ellen White's health principles with the principles of other reformers in books that she is known to have read, and also compared them with modern medical research. He divided her health writing into two categories. What's, which means principles of what to do or what not to do for good health, like drink lots of water, get fresh air. The whys are physiological reasons for those principles. He used modern medicine as a standard. In his own work as a physician, he was very familiar with modern concepts of healthful living. Of course, modern medicine does not give an absolute standard, but it allows a comparison of relative accuracy of different reformers. Not everyone thinks Ellen White was inspired, and so he outlined three hypotheses for the relationship of Ellen White and health principles. First concept, well, what if she was simply deluded, no inspiration? Then you'd expect the first material to be nonsense and then to improve as she read what others had said. Second possibility, she copied her health principles from others. If this was true, then her percent accuracy should be about the same as her sources. Number three, if her health principles were indeed communicated to her from a non-human source, her first writings should be the most accurate and then decrease in accuracy if she incorporated some material from others, as she said she did. All right, let's look at some data on the percent of health principles that have been verified by modern science. He used three categories. Unverified, which means it wasn't necessarily disproved, but it hasn't been supported by modern medicine. Second category is verified and minor, which means modern science supports it, but it has a minor influence on health. Verified and significant means, in his work, it's verified by science and has a significant health influence. In her book, Spiritual Gifts, only 4% of her statements were not verified by science. Then move over to the right of this graph to the Ministry of Healing. In her larger book in 1905, she did decrease somewhat in accuracy. 13.5% of her health principles were not verified by modern science. Now let's go back to those three hypotheses. The evidence we've looked at only fits number three. Her health principles were communicated to her from a non-human source. The evidence accurately fits this explanation. Her accuracy was greatest at first, and then it declined somewhat. Now let's look at a broader comparison with other health reformers of the 1800s. Notice for Graham, 57% of his health principles are not verified by science. For the others, the percent that's not verified is 65% for Alcott, 60% for Coles, 58% for Jackson, etc. And look at the one that really stands out is Spiritual Gifts by Ellen White. Her accuracy level is much higher. And let's compare her now with John Harvey Kellogg, who was a Seventh-day Adventist physician, actually a very prominent physician in the United States at that time. So what influence did he have on her? We notice that his accuracy level is really not much different from the others. 55% has not been verified by science, whereas her 1905 book still is far better than his. So now let's look at another aspect of this. The top graph is the one you saw before, and that's the number of whats that are verified by science. Now look at the lower graph, which is the number of whys, or in other words, the physiological explanations for the health principles. And you notice the accuracy level of most of these people is really bad. Ellen White's accuracy in Ministry of Healing, M of H, is higher than the others, but also not really high. And it looks like the whats and the whys came for Ellen White from different sources. The whats are health principles not available from any human source any time during her lifetime. But the whys are not much more accurate than other reformers. God often tells us what principles to follow, but He leaves it to us to learn the reasons why. And we can see examples for this in the Bible. The Israelites were given the concept of quarantine for sick people. The reasons why were not understandable to them. In fact, they were not understandable for another 4,000 years. But God just told them, do this and you'll avoid spreading disease. Also, the Israelites were told to avoid marriage to close relatives. They also were thousands of years away from understanding the reasons why. But God just told them, do this and you'll be better off. Didn't try to explain why. Ellen White understood the difference between whats and whys. The other reformers said we should not eat any salt. She said, I have been told that we need some salt. The whys and wherefores I do not know. To give a little more clear picture of the comparison between Ellen White and the others, let's look at the health principles not verified by modern science for various reformers. For Jackson, for instance, look at what he said. For a good lifestyle, vaccination is not needed. To wear black is not healthy. Both males and females should have long hair. Marital sexual activity is dangerous to health. Potatoes are not good for children. You can live exclusively on bread. The best diet consists of grains and fruits alone. Don't eat salt. Rubbing the body with the hands will substitute for a bath. Don't use soap. What do you think of those? He was really far off. Graham was a very famous health reformer during the 1800s, but he still had a lot of problems. He said we should rarely heat our houses. For health, we should go naked. It's better not to shave. Perfume should not be used. We should avoid strong smells, even pleasant smells like flowers. We should not use salt. If meat is to be eaten, it should be eaten raw. It's best to not drink water at all. Get water only from fruit. And avoid activities that cause one to perspire. Graham at one point bragged that he had not drank any water for 6 months. That was shortly before he died, probably from dehydration. Let's look now at the health principles of Ellen White that have not been verified by modern science and compare them with what we've read before. The whats that McMahon considers unverified are these. Avoid leaven in bread and usually eat 2 meals a day. Now, we could argue about those, whether those are necessary, but you won't get sick if you follow these. We don't see any of the strange things in her writings that we saw in the other reformers. In conclusion, the whats, first of all, much of Ellen White's information was not available from any human source any time during her lifetime. So inspiration certainly is a possible explanation. Do you have another explanation? Secondly, the whys. They came from a different source. She was only a little more accurate than other health reformers. God often gives us the principles that will be best for us to live by, but He leaves it for us to figure out the reasons why.